This is Touched by Heaven, everyday encounters with God. Those moments where heaven and earth collide and the miraculous happens, and God says, see, I'm right here, right now. Today in this episode, near-death experiences, a couple of them. One lukewarm and one atheist. I'm your host, Trapper Jack. And it reminds me about Sunday's gospel where Jesus says, you didn't choose me, I chose you. And we go, what? I thought I was seeking it. No. He says, no, you didn't choose me, I chose you. Certainly true in these near-death experiences. You know what fascinates me about these stories is how many affect the lukewarm and people who could care less about God and people who disdain God get these experiences. And then I was listening to Bishop Robert Barron this week. He does a kind of a homily podcast, and he says, after somebody has an encounter, a mission is given. An impossible mission? No, it can feel like it at times, but a mission. Example, Jesus would heal somebody, let's say, and then he would say, now go wash and go see the priest, or go sell everything, then come back, or pick up your cross and follow me. He never said, now go back to your home and twiddle thy thumbs. There was no thumb twiddling in the Bible. The two in this episode, the two who were either lukewarm or disdainers of God, were given a mission, and you'll hear what the mission was. One really clearly defined, one a little more vague, but you'll hear the push that the individual was given, a mission. So let's go with it into this episode. A couple of people who had no want or desire for a near-death experience, but they got it. And this was a case where they didn't choose it. Jesus definitely chose them.
My uncle.
Your uncle that had this experience. Okay. And you were going to be a nun or were wondering whether or not you were going to become a nun?
Was for 9 years.
Cheryl Watts. She was a nun for 9 years and she left about 30 years ago.
He was in a severe accident. They didn't really expect him to live. It was one of those things where he was clinically dead for, I don't know, like 4 minutes or whatever it was. And then he went into a coma, and he was in a coma for probably 4 to 6 weeks.
There is the typical near-death experience, if you will, where somebody's, say, on an operating table, and suddenly they're floating above the operating table, looking down on themselves, and the doctor's trying to revive them, and then suddenly there's this tunnel, and the white light, and you feel something so loving, so wonderful.
My mom spent a lot of time with him because she was his only sibling, and they were pretty close. So when he came out of the coma, she was there, and the first thing he said to her, before even being totally awake and alert and whatever, the first thing he said to my mom was, sis, angels don't look like what we think they look like. And she just figured he was like out of it, that he just hadn't totally come around and okay, whatever. And she was telling me about it. And so when we would go talk to him, he would just keep repeating that same thing. Angels don't look like what we think they look like. So as he got better and got more coherent, he would say that angels don't have wings like we think they do. They don't look like what we think they do. But he could never really explain what they look like or anything about them. He said they're beautiful. They move around, but you can't. He said, there's not words to describe it. There's nothing in our language to describe what that is. My grandmother, his mom, had died probably about 3 or 4 years prior to this accident. And he said the angels took him to my grandmother. And he said she was standing kind of like in front of him. He said he could see my grandfather, who had died probably 5 years prior to her dying, but he said he was in the distance. So he didn't talk to him or say anything to him, but my grandmother was the closest, and the angels were around her. So he said when he saw her, the angels were with her. He said the angels told him he needed to go back. He was not finished with his work here, and he needed to go back. And he kept saying, no, I want to stay here with my mom and my family. And they said, no, you have to go back. And he came back, but he never, ever forgot that. And he never changed, the story at all. It was always the exact same thing. Angels don't look like what we think they look like.
Did he ever describe I mean, we hear a lot about near-death experiences, the white light, the tunnel, and all that kind of good stuff. Did he ever talk about that?
He talked about, he said, my grandmother and my grandfather were on, he said the only word he could think of is they were on different planes. And he said my grandfather was a little farther in the distance, and my grandmother, who had, like I said, had only been about 3 years since she had died, she was closer, and that's where the angels were with her.
Was there any other description of this heavenly experience? Anything else that said that he was in heaven?
No, other than he said the different planes that my grandmother and my grandfather were on.
Different level. Because he thought he was in heaven, right?
Yeah, I think he thought that, yeah. Mm-hmm. Or we all assumed that based on how he was talking. But when you talk about the different planes that these people were on, my grandmother and my grandfather.
I'll tell you where my mind is going here, and I could be so far off base here. I'm really curious whether or not he didn't see his mom and dad in purgatory.
Maybe.
And I'm not, you know what I mean? There are levels of purgatory too. I'm just wondering if his near-death experience wasn't purgatory versus heaven. Where am I getting this information about the levels of heaven, levels of purgatory? St. Paul references in a few different places in the Bible levels of heaven. In terms of purgatory, more anecdotal. I'll be talking to Howard Storm a little later on in this episode. He had a near-death experience, and you'll see where. Well, you'll hear where the dark areas are and where things get lighter and brighter. Evan Alexander, the book Proof of Heaven, the neurologist and his experiences, he thought he was in heaven. A lot of people think, no, that's not more like purgatory. Because once again, he started in a very lower, dark, murky place with spirits, and then things got lighter and brighter as he went. Not like as is in the book, Heaven is for Real. The young 4-year-old talking about his experiences. He talks about heaven in terms of, he's seeing Jesus and Mary, and he's seeing angels and saints. There was a fullness of heaven. So all the anecdotal evidence, or even in this experience, Cheryl Watts, her uncle, and what he experienced, not the fullness of heaven of what we've heard from others. There's some pieces and parts missing. That's where we're talking about these different levels. But is it heaven or is it purgatory? This is really fascinating. Exactly. This is a fascinating little ride here, Cheryl, because near death can take you to heaven. It can take you to purgatory. I know Dr. Namey once talked about how he had an experience. It wasn't near death, but he was taken to heaven. He also was taken to purgatory. And in purgatory, he could see Jesus arriving with angels and saints at the upper level and picking people out of the crowd, if you will, and taking them to heaven. He could see it happening in front of, what a great experience, right?
Oh, cool.
And there's something
that would be really depressing if you were one of those people that didn't get to go.
Oh, but you're going. You know you're in the pipeline. You know you're in the pipeline. And I know a lot of people don't believe in purgatory, but there is a purgatory. There is. And there's many.
There's got to be a phase.
Yeah, you can't just be, you just missed the cutoff, you're now in hell. It just doesn't make any sense. It just,
the count is done for months.
You needed an 80 on the test, you got a 79. So sorry, goodbye. Right. It's just, is that the way God works? Yeah, come on, that's not the way God works, So there's just no question that there are those people who live basically good lives, don't quite get the Jesus thing, and need to spend a little time getting the Jesus thing. And then you could be in purgatory for a blink of an eye. It could just be that, it could be that fast, or you could be there for a while.
Well, and his big thing was, I don't understand why I had to come back. He said, what am I supposed to do? I'm in a wheelchair now. I can't do anything. It was really hard for him to get to church. He was not Catholic. He wasn't raised Catholic. He turned Catholic. He after all this happened. But he had never been raised Catholic or gone to Catholic schools or anything like we had all done. So it was totally kind of bizarre for him to even talk like that.
Did this experience turn him towards Catholicism?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Why?
Yeah. Because he became kind of infatuated with the whole situation, what he saw. He said it was beautiful. He said it was just so bright and beautiful and welcoming, I guess.
Well, Protestants go to heaven too, is why I'm asking. It's like
I know
Protestants have these experiences too. That's a fascinating.
But I think he thought, I don't know what he thought. If for some reason, I don't know I don't know if somebody told him he needed to be Catholic. I don't know.
Interesting.
But he turned Catholic after all that happened. A lot of times Father would just bring communion to him. He did say the rosary. In fact, I would show him a lot about the rosary and teach him how to say the rosary and do stuff with him. And then I know he was praying more because he was so worried about his kids and making sure they weren't left with nothing after he died. And because a couple times I would say, well, what makes you think you're going to die anytime soon? And he's like, well, I don't know, but why would I be here? Why am I stuck like this? Because he was not happy with the fact that he couldn't walk anymore and he couldn't get around after the accident. And he said, I don't know why I shouldn't have lived through that accident anyway. And I said, obviously you did. And obviously there was a reason, whatever that may be. And he said, my kids aren't living here. My wife left me. He said, all I have is your mom and you. And he said, I don't know why I'm here, what I'm here for. And I said, then pray.
So for the uncle of Cheryl Watts, was there a mission? Did God give him a mission? Yeah, even if he didn't fully comprehend it, he returned to God. He was, through the Catholic faith, receiving the Eucharist. He was praying more. He was praying the Rosary. He was praying for his children. Is there value in suffering? We know that there is. 9 more years in that wheelchair before he finally did pass away. And then I began to talk to Cheryl about somebody else we talked to during the Blind Faith Live series, Howard Storm. Because with this Howard Storm guy, he was so fascinating because here's this atheist who has his experience. Howard Storm, last I heard they're making a movie about his life. He was a professor in Kentucky, an atheist, hated God, hated the concept of God. He had a lovely atheist wife and their 2 atheist children, and they were vacationing, I think, in Paris, and he got sick, some kind of perforation of the stomach, and he had a near-death experience. Did he see the white light in the tunnel and all that? No. What he experienced was he got out of his hospital bed as he was hearing voices in the hallway calling him, and he looks down at the hospital bed and he sees himself, and he walks out the hospital room, and there are these guys there, and they say, come on, Howard, they're waiting for us, let's go, and he's walking down the hallway, and pretty soon the walls of the hallway disappear, and now it's just him and the guys. And these aren't just any old guys. These are demons, the fallen angels.
And I finally said to them, I'm not going with you any further. And they said, you have to go further. And they started to push and pull me. And I fought back. And we fought a very long time. I was trying to get them off me, but there were lots of them. And I was lying on the ground of that place, sort of in a fetal position. And people were coming by and kicking me, and I didn't even respond to it at all. And I heard a voice that sounded like it came from my chest. And it said, pray to God. And I thought, I don't pray. And the voice said, pray to God. And I thought, I haven't prayed. I don't even know how to pray. And the voice said, pray to God. And I thought, when I was a child, I'd gone to church and I'd learned prayers. And what were those prayers? And I'm trying to remember things. I started to mutter some things in an attempt to actually put together a prayer when the people around me became very angry. And they were saying in very extreme, obscene language that there is no God, nobody could hear me, and they were going to make things much worse for me if I didn't stop praying. And because it made them angry, and also it seemed to be driving them away from me, that encouraged me to try and remember bits and pieces of prayer, which I began to shout at them. And in a very short while, I found that the only thing I could hear anymore was me yelling. And I had no sense that they were anywhere near.
You could make the connection that just the thought of God was driving them away.
Yes, it was very evident.
And you said the voice, did you say from your chest? It felt like it was coming from your chest?
Yes.
Interesting. I mean, you think about hearing things in your ears, your mind, your head, not your chest.
Yeah.
What do you make of that? Just
I think that in a way that was my soul speaking to me. My intellect, which resides in my brain, was an atheist, but my spirit, which I don't know where the spirit resides, I don't think they've ever quite located the exact location of our soul or our spirit, but that was like, listen to me, you idiot.
Or was it trying to make the contact with your heart, or like that's go to that place that you haven't been to for a long time,
Right.
Yeah.
I came to the conclusion my wife was a complete failure as a man, a husband, a father, a son, a teacher, an artist in every way. I knew that I deserved to be in this place, but I didn't want to be in this place, and I certainly didn't want those people to come back, because I knew that they had more processing to do with me.
Would you call it an examination of conscience of sort? Do you feel like that?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. In that state of complete despair and hopelessness, memory came to the rescue, which was of myself as a child in a Sunday school classroom, singing Jesus Loves Me. And more critical was the fact that I felt what I had felt as a child, that there was this wonderful guy who I had no real understanding of, but just knew there was this great guy named Jesus who was God, Son of God, who was always there, who I prayed to and who loved me and would protect me. And I wanted that. And I called out to him. And when I called out to him, he came. And the first thing I saw was a tiny little light in the darkness. And it got very big, very bright, very fast. And then it was right there, impossibly brilliant. More brilliant than like an arc welding light. I used to be a welder, so.
Okay. You're still in fetal position of sorts.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it came over me, and I saw in his light for the first time, I saw me, and it was it looked like roadkill. It was horrible. And his hands and arms came out from the light and reached down and touched me. And when he touched me, all the gore drifted away like it was just fine dust. And when he touched me, he filled me with a love which is indescribable. Been the biggest source of frustration in my life, my inability to describe that love, because if I could describe that love, I would presume that everybody would find it so irresistible that they would want to connect to that love immediately without hesitation. He picked me up and hugged me and held me up against himself. And he rubbed my back. And I hugged him and I cried. And that's when I suddenly realized we were moving upward, very slowly at first, and then more rapidly, and then very rapidly, moving out of the darkness. And as I tried to regain my composure, because I was crying very hard, I looked where we were headed towards, and I saw a world of light and felt more of the love that I was experiencing from Jesus. And all of a sudden I had this gigantic, what a fool I've been. What a bad person I've been, because I've denied God all my life. And now I'm going to heaven. And that's where God is. And I was afraid. And I thought, I'm such a piece of garbage. He's made a terrible mistake. And he said to me, by speaking to my mind, and I hadn't said anything, these were just my thoughts. Mm-hmm. He said to me, and to my mind, he said, we don't make mistakes. We do belong. And I thought, how did he know that? Because I didn't say it. And he said, I know everything you think. And I said, oh, that's not good. And he said, actually, I know everything you've ever thought. And then I started thinking, oh no, there are things that I've thought that I don't even want to acknowledge I've thought. No. I mean,
yeah,
I've had lots of terrible thoughts.
Yeah, those are supposed to be private thoughts. No, nobody's supposed to know those things. Yeah.
Yeah. And he laughed and thought that was really funny. And he said, it's okay. And I began to realize that he didn't just love me. He really, really cared about me and liked me a lot. I also came to realize when we did my life review that he hated the things that I had done in my life, but he never hated me. He always loved me. So that saying that we have in the church, God hates the sin but loves the sinner.
Yeah.
That's true of Jesus. Very, very, very true. And so after a while, he told me that he had people that he wanted me to meet, and he called out, and some people surrounded by different kinds of light came and hovered. Now, we're not in the world of dark, and we're not in the world of light. We're outside the world of light, basically, or heaven. And these people are hovering around me, and he explained that they had recorded my life, and they wanted to show me my life. So we watched my life in chronological order from birth to the present. And after we went through the childhood stage, which was fun, it became increasingly difficult because I saw myself turning away from God and compassion and love and becoming more and more successful and cruel and manipulative and self-centered. And not only did it displease Jesus and the angels, it actually hurt them.
Physically, emotionally. I mean, you just got
I mean, this is a crude analogy, but here I am being held by Jesus, who's rescued me from this hellish place. And we're watching my life, and it's like I'm stabbing him in the heart with a dagger. And all you can keep saying is, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I mean.
Yeah, you feel like you're killing him. Yeah.
Yeah. Because he's a very passionate person. One of the interesting things about Jesus is he's very passionate. He laughs, he cries, he got very strong feelings. And of course, that's evident in the Gospels too. And when that was over, which I had asked many times for it to be over, because I got really embarrassed about my life, he said, do you have any questions? And I said, I have a million questions. And so he said, ask whatever you want. I asked him about the past, the present, the future. Lots of questions about me, lots of questions about the Bible.
Okay.
Lots of questions about Jesus. He was a very kind and patient teacher, best teacher I've ever had. Jesus' great commandment, love one another. That's what he told me to do. I mean, he made it clear to me that God wants everyone to go to heaven. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people that don't want to go there.
If they knew, if they had your experience, maybe, you think they'd get it? Because, I mean, look how he turned you around.
I would, if I ran the world, if you made me tyrant of the world, I would, anyone that didn't accept Jesus as the Lord and Savior, I would put them in a torture chamber until they confessed Jesus.
Well, what a sweet thing to say, Howard.
I'm kidding. Because that's not how he wants us to come.
Have you learned nothing, Howard?
I know. Yeah.
But you've had this incredibly, you're like a reformed smoker now. It's like, please, you want to shake people and go, come, are you kidding me? That's what you are,
Exactly.
What a great experience. Okay, now then, let's go back a second here. These beings that came in, and I don't know if they were holding up screens or how they did this exactly to show you your life. Angels? People?
Yes.
Angels?
Yes.
They look like angels, as we think of angels?
Well, they were beautiful and they were surrounded in light. At one point, they asked me if I wanted to see their human form, and I said no. I told them that I hate people. I never want to see people again.
Okay. So you see your life, you're asking questions. Okay, go. Where do we go next?
I finally said to him, I want to go to heaven. We'd talked a lot about heaven. He had shown me things about heaven. And of course, heaven's the no-brainer choice for anyone with a molecule of consciousness should know that. And he said, no, you're not, it's not your time to go to heaven. You're not fit to go to heaven. You have to come back to the world and live the way you were created to be in the first place. And he and I had a really big argument, and I argued as forcefully and as passionately as I could to go to heaven, and he countered my arguments with better arguments about why that wasn't going to happen. And ultimately, I had to accept that, and I agreed that I would come back to this world. I asked him, I said, if I go back to the world, what do you want me to do? And he said, love the person that you're with. And I said, yeah, but what do you want me to do? And he said, that's what I want you to do. And I said, that's it? And he said, yep, that's it. He said, and then he said the thing that really settled me. He said, if you do that, that'll change the world. And I said, I don't think so. I said,
you're a trip, Howard. You're a trip.
No, I mean,
but you know, it's funny because it sounds simple, doesn't it? It sounds simple.
It just seemed too simple. It's like, how can loving people change the world? And he explained to me that it was God's plan.
But just as he was in the moment with you, that's how we're supposed to be with everybody, to be in the moment with them, loving that person.
Right.
Yeah, that's not real easy sometimes.
No, I thought it was going to be so easy, and I've been working on this for almost 30 years now, and I mess up all the time. I get so frustrated with myself.
We all do. And I want to live there with you. I want to go there. I want to see that movie. I want to see you and Jesus and the angels in that moment and see what you saw and felt.
But the problem was, like, when I saw my wife on Sunday morning, which was the next morning, I tried to tell her what had happened to me, and it was very evident to me that she wasn't believing a word I was saying. She just thought I was in La La Land somewhere. And I knew it was going to be a really big problem. And it has been an interesting problem because many people have hurt me with their criticism of me, telling me I'm crazy.
People who knew you before, you're talking about? Friends, that kind of thing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Family.
Yeah.
I've lost, that wife eventually left me, which broke my heart. Did her best to turn our two children against me. All of my friends at the university wanted nothing to do with me. I was a full professor and a department head, Northern Kentucky University. Okay,
that had to hurt.
Yeah,
you were ostracized. You're out there in the weird land, you know.
Yeah, and I of course, as soon as I was able, I started going to church, and I just fell in love with the church. Because the reason why I fell in love with the church, because I realized it was a great place for sinners. You know, yeah. I was afraid to go to church because I thought it was like a museum of saints. And then when I found out that it was a room full of sinners, I'm like, hey, I fit right in.
Yep. Yep.
And I've been a member of that church all my life. But anyways, I got very involved in the work of the church, and eventually realized that God had a call on me to give my life to the church. So I left the university. I went to seminary for 3.5 years and became ordained pastor, which I did for 22 years, served churches for 22 years.
Beautiful, beautiful. Which branch?
United Church of Christ.
Okay. For believers, what are the theories? Where you went? What happened? Give me the theories of believers.
I've gotten the whole range from people being very supportive to people saying it couldn't possibly have happened, God doesn't work that way, and that it was a delusion.
Even amongst believers.
Yeah.
God doesn't work that way because they know this how?
Yeah, well, I had a person write me and tell me it couldn't have happened because God doesn't resurrect anybody. Oh, that's interesting. Mm-hmm. A new theory on Christianity. I didn't write him back because I didn't know where we could begin our conversation.
Right.
Well, my Catholic friends, of course, have a perfect explanation, which is purgatory.
Mm-hmm.
And
that doesn't sit with you?
I'm a Protestant, and
right.
It's not something we studied in seminary. We didn't ever talk about purgatory because I went to a Methodist seminary. I know where I was, and I was being processed for eternal damnation in hell, whether I was in hell or entering hell or in pre-hell, immaterial. I mean, no, you wouldn't want the worst person in the world to go to that place.
Right.
And I know that where I was not the really bad part. I was just being prepped. But I think that God had plans for me. I think God, in his terrific sense of humor, said, I'm going to take this atheist and turn him around, and he's a big mouth, and he's going to tell people all about my plan for them. To go to heaven. And that'll be really funny.
It shows God's love for us, Jesus' love for us, that he will go after an atheist. He'll go after that lost sheep so hard. Right. Even after we die, we still have a shot.
The Bible says in 3 places, anyone who calls upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. And that describes what happened to me. He's not only the best friend that I have, but the love and the kindness of God all wrapped up in my best friend. He's a really great person to have in my life. Out of desperation, I called on Jesus, and he did not disappoint me, and he's never disappointed me since.
Thank you, Howard. Howard Storm, he wrote a book. It's called My Descent into Death. And as I say, last I heard, they're making a movie about his life. And if they do that right, that is powerful. Was there a mission? Was there a mission after the encounter? Yeah. Go love the person that is in front of you. Love the one that you're with. And then he felt that further call to become a pastor in a Protestant church. And to bring Cheryl Watts back into this again, because we heard about levels again, didn't we? Just like with the uncle, the levels, being at that lower level, Jesus taking Howard and bringing him up where things got brighter and where they could see the lights of heaven. And then the angels, bringing the angels into this again. Both describe the angels in a very similar fashion. Nobody's talking about wings in this particular case. They're talking about these beings, and they're flying, and they're moving, and beings of light, if you will. And Cheryl, how they encircled Howard in his case, how they encircled him with those holding the monitors, as he got to review his life. And
do they have computers in heaven?
Do they? Yeah, but they haven't gotten Wi-Fi yet. What are the odds? I figured they'd have Wi-Fi by now. I mean, come on. Near-death experiences shows us again that we don't choose God. God chooses us and will continue to pursue us. Which also reminds me, if you've been praying for someone that just seems a million miles away, have faith in your prayers and have faith in Jesus Christ. He's not going to stop. He will descend to the dead to bring them back. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. If so, I hope you also will consider supporting it. Welcome aboard, Robert Wiley, now supporting us through Patreon, as is Katie Elizabeth. Thank you so much. Please go to touchedbyheaven.net and become a patron through Patreon. Thank you so much. I will see you next time. Touched by Heaven, everyday encounters with God. See you next time. I'm Trapper Jack.